Okay, I will call to order the council meeting for Monday, November 22nd at 6:30 p.m. And I would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the shared traditional lands of the coast. Oh, excuse me, we're changing the wording now. So I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the shared traditional lands of the Lekwungen speaking peoples. I'm not going to do a roll call because we're all in chambers, but if anybody's watching online, all 7 of us are here. Moving on to 2, approval of the agenda. This is the near term, long term, and regular council meeting. Are there any objections to the approval of the agenda and receipt of the near term and long term agendas? Seeing none, I will, no objections, then I will state that it's been approved by unanimous consent. Moving on to 3, old business. This is in regards to the municipal consent for bylaw number 4468, the Capital Regional District. This is, we have changed the agenda this evening just because the CRD does have another presentation to go to, so they are fighting a bit of time. So I will look to Mr. Borhill for introduction, or am I looking to somebody else? Staff? In my notes, it says Mr. Borhill.
We actually have the CRD representative ready to do the presentation. I'm just going to share his screen for him.
So Mr. Borhill is not doing an introduction? Okay, we will go straight to the CRD. Is he there?
Hi there, good evening, Mayor.
Oh, there you are. Hello, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to come and present in support of the referral. So hopefully you can hear me okay. My headset's not working, but hopefully you can hear me all right.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great, thanks. I thought it's just a short presentation, and then I'll be there certainly to answer questions and hopefully provide some clarification. I did listen to your last meeting, and I apologize for not being available then or not debated, because I certainly would have hopefully clarified a few questions there, but hopefully we'll do this tonight. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background on the referral. I'll talk a little bit about process and then a little bit more on the content and context. And then we'll go from there, and there should be time for questions and answers. So the CRD is committed to taking action to address climate change, not only within our individual corporate operations, but also at the regional level. And it's highlighted by the board's direction to declare a climate emergency. And at the same time, there was a commitment to take a leadership role in taking action to pursue our regional carbon neutrality. So staff took that direction and started working on a new strategy. We really updated an older regional plan that was there from 2017. We had a corporate strategy from 2016. We've combined them into one document similar to what Metro and other large organizations have done, and we brought that forward. So really, the strategy hopefully gives us a pathway towards our climate action goals. And what you have tonight is really a request to increase the established bylaw. So we have a bylaw that gives us authority to implement a climate action service on behalf of local governments. It requires, in this case, 2/3 consent to amend that bylaw. So 2/3 consent of all participating participants, and that's all 13 local governments in the 3 electoral areas. So it truly is a regional service. The board passed first, second, and third reading of the establishing bylaw amendment. Then then it gets referred out to you as the local government to actually approve or consider that request. And so that's where we're on in terms of process. The actual strategy, well, maybe I'll go into the next one and we can talk about, I'll move forward, sorry, do that. So there you go, thanks very much. So I'll just speak about the service. I want to just emphasize that the intent of the CRD service, and hopefully all services, is to be complementary and collaborative with the intentions of local governments. It's never meant to compete or conflict with you at all. And so it's being a relatively small service. It was established in 2008. Up until recently, it had 1.5 bodies. Now it's up to 2.5 bodies with a community energy manager position. It's intended to provide some planning functions and implement programs. It regionalizes a lot of programs to make sure it's available to the citizens across the region. A lot of outreach and education is involved. That's a big part of our work, is to get the message out across the communities as well as with our partners. There's a fair bit of research we do on behalf, so data collection and research, and I can speak to that in a minute. But things like the greenhouse gas inventories that are required for you to set your targets, climate projections, we take global models and downscale them to make them regionally relevant for local governments and regional governments to implement their services and public stuff. We did the sea level rise work. That's been a big part of it. So that's the kind of stuff we do that benefits hopefully across the region. And then finally, the CRD's got a significant number of services that we provide across the region. We have obligations and commitments on our climate targets. And so we provide support to the organization writ large to support the various services. If we go to the next slide, please. So the strategy has sort of come out with a lot of consultation. There was a lot of work across the organization through the various departments and service deliveries, but also with the communities. And so our the service itself reports up to the board, but really it's in support of all local governments. And so we had an established intermunicipal working group. It has representations at the staff level from across all the participants. And the intention is this is a clearinghouse to understand what's going on across the region, to bring forward ideas, to make sure that we're in alignment and understand each other's needs, roles, and responsibilities to move forward. We also have an intermunicipal task force that's represented by councillors from each of the local governments, and we've been fortunate to have the leadership of Councillor Baxter on that for the last few years, and appreciate the input. And the intention there is to understand at a political level, again, what the service delivery is all about and what are the priorities, and then hear from an opportunity to share the initiatives and leadership that's going on at local governments. And so through the strategy, we finished the consultation, we came up with this collective vision, which is very simple really, is to reduce our emissions as much as to extent possible, to get to this concept of net zero by 2050, and then to prepare our communities, the natural environment and our communities for the inevitable changes that are coming with climate change. And so we have a vision, we established targets. You can see in ours, we have a 45% reduction by 2030, getting towards net zero by 2050. So no new carbon emissions produced by our communities by 2050. That aligns with provincial, federal, and international goals. And you can see the second goal for the community, regional GHG emissions of 61%. That's embedded in the regional growth strategy. And really that's an extrapolation from where we were to where we need to get in 2050, and 61% is embedded in there. You would have similar goals embedded in your official community plans. That's required under Bill 26 of the province. And so we are starting to get those targets. And now with this strategy, we're coming forward with a clear, hopefully, pathway. And you can see the goal areas. I think they're fairly straightforward. And if you've had a chance to read the strategy, or since they probably resonate with you, I know Colwood's been a good regional leader for us. And so we know a lot of your initiatives speak to this already, but making climate action explicitly considered in all of our decision making across the organization and the service delivery, this idea of sustainable land use planning and prevention. So low carbon mobility, whether it's active transportation or a focus on EV mobility, low carbon and building efficiency. That's where we know buildings and have a large demand on energy use. And so that's a targeted area. Clearly the resilient and the abundant natural environment, the resilience in the face of climate change coming. And then of course, minimizing waste is an integral to that overall plan. So next slide. So this speaks to the pathway, and I'll just speak to it quickly. We track our emissions. That's important. So we have targets to measure against our success at that. And we've done a fair bit of work with the modeling and through the strategy to understand where those emissions are and what programs and projects and initiatives are best going to be successful in achieving our target. And you can see that 2050 target of zero net emissions. And so we recognize there's a lot of pieces that have to come together. There's a lot of things to be successful. It's an ambitious target, but clearly as a community and as a region, we understand we've got to move forward in trying to tackle these. And so we're trying to do it in a systematic way that makes sense and has the best chance for success. The referral today that is for your consideration really is to fund the next 5 years of this strategy. And our focus is going to be on this active transportation, the shift in active transportation mode, accelerating a shift to EV, looking at the residential retrofit program, and I'll speak to those two things in the next two slides. This emphasis on converting our oil dependency and our heating to heat pumps. We've got initiatives. Colwood's got the initiative. We've created a regional rebate program. And then down the road, we'll start attracting our attention to multiple family units, the condos, the rental buildings. That'll be the next step of where the various levels of governments will try and target their initiatives. And so we've got a pathway. We think this is the best plan given the knowledge we have right forward. And so for us to implement that, we need some more resources to move forward and take on the regional roles and responsibilities to support local government objectives and efforts, as well as make sure that we're aligned with provincial and federal goals and priorities. Next slide, please. We just had staff quickly just sort of put a breakdown of the energy uses, the energy sources in Colwood, just give you a sense of how we're trying to focus this program. So the Regional Building Energy Retrofit Program is aligned with provincial and federal goals that identify that the residential stock needs to become more energy efficient and move away from fossil fuel dependency. And so, for example, you can see that in Colwood, a relatively high dependence on oil. We know that the oil to heat pump conversion is something we're going to continue to promote and encourage. We know that gas is one of the major heating systems, and there's an opportunities to improve efficiency with building envelope improvements. There's going to be various incentives through Fortis. We're going to try and make sure that we support homeowners who have done energy audits. And so I know Colwood and other municipalities promote that energy audits and reviews. The next step then is to sort of help the homeowners directly navigating what does that energy audit mean, and then what are the opportunities out there in terms of rebates and incentives to move towards their common goals, which is to improve building efficiency, save money, but also move off of fossil fuels. And you can see obviously a big emphasis on electric baseboards. That tends to be one of the more expensive ways to heat a home. And so there'll be opportunities for cost savings, substantial efficiency gains, and increased resilience through heat pump retrofits. And so we're moving in that direction. And hopefully that you start to get a sense of us trying to complement what Colwood and other local governments are doing and trying to make this more efficient and effective in the way we go about this. Next slide. So this is the other big component of the 5-year plan that we got forward. I know last week, Councillor Baxter spoke to the engagement in the community about EV use and the availability of apps to know where our charging is. What we're trying to do is take the next step and try and provide more charging stations that can be put onto that app, and people have a better sense of where to go. And essentially, as we know now, there's just under 2% of vehicles registered in the region, and Colwood is very similar to that, are EV. And through natural growth, we're probably going to get up to about 11% plus or minus by 2030. But the province has established a goal where they want 30% of the light duty vehicles on the road, so the typical cars and SUVs and minivans, they need to be electric. That'll be working on the road. So to do that, we need charging infrastructure in place. We also know that about 40% of the region is not living in single family dwellings where they could just install a charging system on their property. And so we have to create public infrastructure. The CRD went through this past year and a half program called the Roadmaps Project to try and identify the number of charging stations in place, what kind of technology we need, and roughly where we think this needs to be placed. So we think to achieve that target of 2030, there needs to be about 900 units across the region. Some of them will be on private property, some of them, a lot of it in the public system. And so to achieve that target, we have to have that public infrastructure in place. We know the province and the Fed have identified this as a priority, and we know there's a lot of dollars coming in terms of infrastructure to put those systems in place. And so what we need is a champion, someone to bring that forward. There'll be a lot of outreach. There'll be a lot of discussions on service plans and service agreements with rec centers and malls and grocery stores and wherever we think public infrastructure needs to be in place so that people can access that to actually take up and make the shift to electric vehicles as well. So that's the other big part of it. Next slide. Thank you. I'll just speak briefly on one of the other parts of the lift is to support a corporate energy, in this case, Keith says key project manager. The CRD offers a lot of services, about 200 services across the region. We have a large inventory of housing, of health facilities, We've got the rec centers, and we do a lot of work with wastewater, drinking water, or solid waste, as you know. The intent is to try and look for ways to improve the efficiency of those, in terms of energy efficiency of those facilities and those services, to look at renewable energy projects, to develop policies and model bylaws and corporate best practices that not only benefit the corporation, but we hope to push out and we collectively benefit and learn together about that. So that's the other part of this requisition lift and the priorities that are the foundation of this establishing bylaw amendment. I think there's just two more slides. Next one, please. So I just wanted to summarize the main thrusts of the requisition lift and what we're looking for. So the three key areas, again, aligned with provincial, federal, and I think local government priorities, is this emphasis on Part 9 of the building code, the existing residential buildings, you know, the single family dwellings, the duplexes that can really benefit from energy efficiency and to really reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and our overall energy costs. I spoke about the public EV coordinator. That's another key thrust of the 5-year plan, is to make sure that we have the infrastructure in place to support our movement towards electric vehicles. And then finally, the corporate energy manager position, and that's going to, as I speak to, is going to support the organization writ large with the many services that we provide to the region and to local governments to try and make us more energy efficient and effective, and hopefully get our costs down, but also reduce our dependency on fossil fuels as well. And I think the last slide just summarizes it. Just go to the last slide, and I think we'll then be ready for questions. So again, it's not a large service. It hasn't been. As I mentioned, you know, 1.5, we're up to about 2.5 bodies. The requisition lift is going up to 1.73. That's the maximum requisition. This plan is to support the next 5 years. Those bodies that we're trying to bring on to deliver the service are term positions. I would imagine, and we don't think climate action is going away, that there'll be other priorities, but if we're successful here in the next 5 years, we will be able to shift our focus and our attention to the next steps of that pathway that you saw earlier on in the plan. So I can stop there and answer any questions, Mayor, and thank you very much for your attention to this.
Thank you very much. Council, questions? Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Glenn, I guess I was the troublemaker at the last meeting because I clearly did not understand after reading the report, but it's clear on the second and third read, actually, what exactly your plan is. What concerns me right now, and maybe you can clarify this with me. What I see right now is that I believe there's about 3 municipalities that have developed a climate action plan. And that's what I believe it is. But we're going to get 13 different climate action plans. So is the intent at some time, is the CRD going to take the leadership here so that we get these all coordinated? Because what I'm seeing, even with the CRD plan, for example, by your own data, you look at it and the biggest GHG producer is transportation, 47%. It's even greater than residential and commercial buildings put together. So, you know, I don't think the focus is in the right place, but it is what it is. That's your plan. I don't think we're spending enough in this because I'm on your side on this one right now. If it's a climate emergency, but we're certainly not treating it as an emergency. This is just my humble opinion. So I guess what I'm trying to, my first part of this question is, you know, are we going to have like a coordinated plan? So there's regular meetings and CRD is going to take the leadership so that we all have similar type plans. We can learn from each other. We can come up with the best plan. That's my first question. It's clear now where the money is being spent. Like I said, I think you're underspending. I think you should be going for more if this is an emergency. We treat all other emergencies like there's no tomorrow. I guess my third question is, how are you measuring GHGs? Is this real time that we're going to be able to see this? Like, who calculates this? Can we go to the CRD website and can we look at this annually or semi-annually where you're updating how we're doing? It's great to have these targets, but there's no, I couldn't find one measurement anywhere so that we could say, yeah, what we're doing here by spending this money, it's effective. So, we've got to have measurements so that we understand if what we're doing is effective. And so that's my next question. And yeah, I think that captures the main gist of what I was trying to get out of this right now. But it's clear now that what you're doing is CRD CRD centric, if I can use the word. It's really not doing some. It is doing something for the city, for each of the municipalities, but we have to develop our own. It looks like. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kobayashi, and I'll speak to those questions. And in terms of a coordinated plan, I don't think that's the intention of the CRD. For me, it's more about roles and responsibilities. So the regional government has a role to play and responsibilities. And philosophically, what we're trying to do is bring everyone together and make sure everyone understands their roles and responsibilities, and then we hold each other accountable for that. So the intent of the plan is, what the CRD role is really to facilitate the conversation. So we try and do that with local governments through the intermunicipal working groups. So we have a champion at the staff level to bring forward what's going on at council and in the corporate local government in terms of their priorities and what they're going. So there's shared learning there, but there's also alignment. And what we try and do is provide support for what you need to accomplish. So whether it's measuring greenhouse gases on your behalf, developing projects that are important to you. The city of Colwood was a leader in solar Colwood. We took that and made that a regional plan or project to not only complement and support Colwood's initiatives, but to learn and say that's something that could benefit across the region. So we're looking for those ways to facilitate that. You're right that some local governments are developing their plans. They're on the pathway to establishing where they're going. The conversation that's happening through the intermunicipal working group and frankly through the task force as well, because that's the political leadership that's needed, is starting to align the priorities. And so we want to make sure that we understand where the province and federal governments are going. I mean, we're provincial and federal citizens. They're dedicating dollars. It makes sense that we're aligned with their priorities and their dollars, so we can take best advantage of that. So that's why we're focusing on the EV infrastructure as well as the residential retrofits, because senior levels of government have signaled that's their priority. So we want to make sure that the region is in a position to take advantage of that. So whether or not we're getting grants on your behalf, we're developing programs that benefit us all and taking as much of the resources as we can get. The intention is not for us to be CRD centric. So to your last question, is we have services and there's a part of it that corporate energy manager will really drive some of our initiatives on our services, or wastewater, drinking water, solid waste, housing, rec centers, that hopefully as a benefit, if we reduce our costs, we meet our corporate goals and we all benefit from that. And there's learnings there. In terms of the third comment, you're about greenhouse gas inventories. There are protocols that we follow. When we all signed on to the climate charter in 2007, the provincial government committed to producing biannual, every 2 years, greenhouse gas inventories. Unfortunately, they didn't follow through with that. So in order, to your point, and you brought it up last week, we need to measure our success. So we had to have a baseline of 2007. The CRD went out and developed that with a consultant to make sure we had a baseline. And we've committed to developing updates of that inventory every 2 years. We've just released the last one, 2018, and those are all available on our website. And your staff representatives, they get the newsletter, they get to the meetings, they'll know where to find that for you if you can't find it yourself on the website. But you're right, we need the inventories. It's a protocol, it's standard across the province in terms of measuring what's in scope and what we can measure our success against. And that's the big challenge. And so when you see that graph and you see the emissions dropping, that's what we're going to be measuring. And you'll be able to hold staff accountable and the communities accountable to see if we're being successful. And then the last comment you made, Councillor Kobayashi, was about being underspent. And I've had that question at a few council presentations. Can we do more and spend more? And my feeling was, and my recommendation is that we're following the strategy. And if we're successful with this, we'll be in a position to take advantage of the money that's coming down the road for the next step. So we've got a 5-year plan. Let's be successful with those. And we'll be set up when the province and the federal government turns their attention to the next parts of that pathway. So there is room to take on more resources. We may come back in a couple of years if the residential retrofit program uptake is really good and we need just a bit more resources to get the message out, raise awareness, and support citizens across the region with retrofit programs, understanding the pathway to their goals of building energy efficiency.
Thanks very much, Glenn.
Councillor Baxter.
Hi, Glenn. I think the question boils down for me to, if we've got certain money we can spend fighting climate change, is it better that we spend it, or is it better that we give it to you to spend? So taking EV chargers as an example, I think you said 900 chargers eventually, did you? Right. You mentioned the point that a lot of people in the region do not live in single-family dwellings. And I imagine that percentage in, say, Victoria is much higher than it is in Colwood. So from Colwood's point of view, it might be better to keep the money in Colwood, because we need a different kind of incentive to get people to put chargers in their own garages, since most of them have them, rather than the incentives to the multifamily dwellings to install chargers. So if we keep the money in Colwood, we do our own Colwood custom programs, which will work most effectively for Colwood. If we give it to the CRD, it will be distributed according to a different formula, based on what is needed there.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. I'll just respond. So a big part of the program will be education awareness. We know that for those in the know, they know what needs to be done in that. But there's a lot of people need to understand and develop confidence that they can move to an electric vehicle, and know that the charging infrastructure is in place. So a big part of what we're doing at a regional level is raising the education awareness. The second thing is that we want to make sure that we're coordinated. So the roadmap explicitly took into consideration the density and the development and the housing types across the region. And the intention is to understand where growth is going, what's going to be needed in the future, and for that 2030 target. And there'll continue to be infrastructure put in place moving forward. But what's best for Colwood, Metchosin, the outlying municipalities, as well as some of the core ones where you speak to a little bit higher density. So we'll be making application and granting requests on behalf of local governments. We're working with local government staff to make sure that everybody's needs are met and we have a coordinated approach. So there's nothing stopping individual municipalities, of course, from going out and charging the infrastructure. We're just putting in place an overall plan to make sure that we're coordinated and it makes sense for all citizens across the region.
Thank you.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. And thank you for your presentation, Glenn. Part of the argument is that it really doesn't matter where you make your greenhouse gas savings. It's affecting the air we're all trying to breathe. But there is a considerable concern that that the money that we put into this program might make a bigger difference if it was spent here in Colwood. I do really like the emphasis that you have on the charging infrastructure. One of the people that I follow a lot on YouTube is Sandy Monroe. He's a longtime auto worker. He's working quite a lot with Chinese companies and particularly on manufacturing. And his prediction is that by 2026, you won't be able to buy a gas-powered car simply because there is some big market changes coming, being driven by forces much larger than the CRD or Vancouver Island or even BC. So I still think that means that the charging infrastructure that you're seeking to implement will make a difference, and it will make a difference to people from Colwood as well if that charging infrastructure is present throughout the region. in terms of being able to do anything they need to do for various reasons. My concern and my question is though on the amount of money that's being spent on the administration of this program versus the amount of money that's being directed to chargers on the ground or heat pumps in houses. Can you tell me what the percentages work out to concrete versus labor initiative?
Thank you, Councillor Day. I'll just give some context and I'll see if I can answer that question directly, although I don't know if I can, the breakdown. So you're correct in that there's dramatic changes coming across the province, the nation, and internationally, and that the whole idea of our service is to try and make sure that we as a region and all our local governments and all our citizens understand that. So you're right. Clean BC program by the province says that 90% of the vehicles sold in 2030 will be electric. 90%. They're also establishing that 25% of the vehicles on the road at that time will be electric. So there are forces coming that we need to plan for it for sure. And so whether you live in Colwood and work in Saanich or work in Saanich or live in Saanich and work in Colwood, there's people moving around. And so it makes sense that we should have a regional consideration. In terms of overhead and things, so we're asking for half a body, half a full-time equivalent position to coordinate that EV infrastructure planning, the education and outreach, the grant requests, the conversations with the communities about service agreements, about where they're going to be put in place, working with local governments. So that's a 0.5 position over the next 5 years. And that's where we hopefully have it all installed then. So the CRD, a body costs $100,000 with our overhead kind of thing. And so you get a sense of the scale of the amount of work. We definitely need a champion or someone to actually do the work. We think we can do it with half a body. What we try to be as most efficient as possible. The other half of that body will do the residential retrofit. So those are the two big strengths. That one body, that one person reporting through to a supervisor that I oversee with all the other environmental programs will be focused on that. So that's what you're looking at in terms of the cost. The rest of the money, and so you saw that graph, is meant for program delivery, education and awareness, grant writing, some in-kind support for some of these grants. We sometimes need to put up some money to gather these grants. That's where the money's going, and we've put as much into the program itself in terms of being successful. So we know what our goal is. We're trying to do it as effectively and efficiently as possible. It's a small climate action program. We've been small for the longest time. The idea is to leverage and be a resource to all the stakeholders and all the partners. So I can't give you an exact overhead. I mean, a little bit of my time, but it's subsidized by all the other services, is given towards leadership and direction. We have a supervisor that's within the existing program. You saw the $400,000. That's the 1.5, well, now 2 bodies in there. And so it's a pretty lean service and there's not a lot of overhead per se.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I share a number of the concerns that we've heard around the table. I think they're sort of probably the things we should be worried about as councillors. But we should be perhaps more worried about what we can do, even if it's a little itty bit for climate change. And I think, I don't know if this money is going to be fantastic to make a difference. But let's, as this council and future councils, take it as a challenge to try and see how well the CRD is doing and see if we can do better. So frankly, I'm prepared to move the recommendation that council consent to the CRD adopting the bylaw.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder to that motion, please? Seconded by Councillor Kobayashi. Is there any other discussion? Councillor Baxter?
I'm shocked in a very pleased way. I have a feeling that the events of the last few days have changed the mood in this room, and I'm very glad. Not that the events happen, but that the mood's changed, and therefore I can only support the motion.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Thank you. And thank you for, thanks for coming. I know you got to get to another one right away, so we'll let you go.
No, we appreciate it. Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. We appreciate your support. That's great.
Thank you. We are going to continue down our agenda, which brings us to public participation. One written submission regarding 791 Drummond Way was received, and there was no one registered to speak online. Yes, Councillor Day.
Sorry, I just wanted to speak to the submission from 791 Drummond Way.
Well, this is public participation.
I
I don't
understand that.
I will look to staff. Mr. Earl, is it appropriate that council speaks during public participation?
It's not inappropriate if council had a question. I'm not sure if the writer
question.
could answer.
Go ahead.
Yes, just my question is whether or not it's appropriate. That is a letter, I believe, from the developer who's not a resident of Colwood. So I'm just challenging that is, I don't think it should be identified as public participation. That's not a resident telling us something. That's a developer telling us something. Thank you. That's all.
Okay, I will. We will look into it post meeting and discuss it with staff that in regards to policy around public participation. Before I look to the audience for public participation, I have a whole thing to read if anyone is going to speak. Is anyone going to speak during public participation? If not, I'm not going to bother reading it. Nope. It's just about rules, like things you cannot do during public participation. So it's not like it's a secret or anything. I just don't want to spend 5 minutes reading it if nobody's speaking during public. Okay, last chance. Nope. Okay, thank you. That moves us on to Mayor's message. Just two quick things to share. Councillor Parkinson, Councillor Jansen, myself, Councillor Kobayashi, and Councillor Baxter were able to attend today's South Island Prosperity Local Leadership Day in regards to Rising Economy Week. I thought the workshop today was quite educational. A lot of it had to deal with COP26. We were very fortunate that we had the Mayor of Glasgow, Scotland, and who was also the host of COP26, and David Miller, who is the former Mayor of Toronto, was in a panel and spoke. And then one of the most impactful things that I heard today was actually by Chief Gordon Plains of the Sauk First Nations. And he spoke about economic development through a 7-generational Indigenous worldview. And it was really impactful for me. I really was able to hear it, and it resonated. So really appreciated the people that were able to attend. I know Councillor Logan and Councillor Day had to work, but I appreciate that the rest of the council made an effort to come down. So thank you. The other thing that I just wanted to announce was December 18th, which is a Saturday. This council will be in front of Thrifty Foods in Colwood for the Salvation Army, ringing bells and doing it. So very much encourage all the public to come down and make a donation if you can. Moving on to adoption of minutes. So I'm looking for a recommendation to adopt the minutes of the regular council meeting held November 8th. Moved by Councillor Jansen, seconded by Councillor Day. Any errors, omissions, questions? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Moving on to 7.1, Harley Gordon, who is the chair of the Citizens Environmental Network in Colwood for a presentation. So I will bring both of you up. I believe I also have Karen Woodland who will also be speaking. Oh, sorry. Yeah, there you go.
How's this? Great. So thank you, Mayor Martin. Are you anxious about the future? From what I saw in this room, I think a lot of you are. I know I am. heat waves, droughts, fires, floods, power outages, gas shortages, all in the same year we've had a pandemic. Now, these are not once in a lifetime events anymore. They're setting precedents for the future that we're all about to face. Now, nearly 3 years ago, Colwood City Council declared a climate emergency. Well, the emergency is here and it's not going away. Now, like you said, I'm here as a member of Scenic, which is the Citizens Environment Network in Colwood. And we're a group of Colwood residents committed to climate action and climate resiliency, specifically around the municipality. Now, action means taking steps as a city, taking steps as a municipality to reduce our emissions. This is climate action. Resiliency means a couple of things. The first one is it means a city with infrastructure to face the challenges that are already coming, that we can't stop, the floods that are going to keep happening because it's already here. The infrastructure that Glenn Harris actually mentioned with the CRD. The second part about resiliency is the community that we're building to be resilient. We saw it in Abbotsford when the community floods and then it comes together to put sandbags up, to help protect people's livestock. They work together as a community. That's what Scenic is here for. We're here because the future we face together. We face it as a community. And groups like Scenic, groups of Colwood residents that come together to build a community in the face of uncertainty in the future are incredibly important. So I want to thank the council for the support that they've shown Scenic in the past. And I want to ask that we continue our very collaborative relationship working together in the future. Because like I said, the future we face together. Now, thanks for granting us several minutes to talk about Scenic's ideas for Colwood's upcoming low carbon resiliency plan. And I just want to introduce Karen Woodland, who's going to speak a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Harley, and thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to speak this evening on such a critical issue. We know from the recently completed COP26 that we are in a code red for humanity, and the next decade may be our last best chance to take action on climate change. Today, BC is in a state of emergency. We didn't know this when we asked to speak tonight. Didn't know that would happen. No one did, but well. So we face enormous challenges to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and reverse years of damage to the environment, to forests, to soils, to ocean, to the air we breathe. For the past 30 years, government efforts on global warming have waxed and waned. For example, in 1993, Canada passed the National Roundtable on the Environment and the Economy Act, repealed 10 years later by Stephen Harper. So there's no more room for denial. There's no more kicking it down the road to the next government or the next generation. The time is now. We really need to act. We understand that work on Colwood's low carbon resiliency plan will begin in January 2022, and Scenic is keen and pleased and willing to contribute to this important plan. Solving the climate crisis is not the sole responsibility of municipal governments. However, as the level of government closest to the people, you have a vital role to play. Your actions and your initiatives do and will continue to make a huge difference in our lives. The City of Colwood is already taking many steps towards a climate resilient community, for example, with the Master Parks Plan, transportation planning, traffic calming, adding pedestrian walkways and cycling lanes, and the Waterfront Stewardship Plan. And we applaud and fully support these efforts. Climate action, we believe, as Harley noted, is an enormous opportunity to contribute to a vibrant, livable city where both nature and citizens thrive. Colwood has indeed already been identified as a climate champion with its award-winning Solar Colwood program. This innovative citizen-supported program led to region-wide initiatives on energy retrofits in buildings, growth in EV charging, and ownership, and made Colwood the testing ground for the uptake of ductless split heat pumps that are now widely promoted for reducing GHGs in buildings. In fact, in 2010, Colwood had a climate plan, but it was called the Energy and Emissions Plan. And the forward-thinking architects of that plan are in the room this evening. Former Councillor Judith Collington, co-founder of Signage, and Councillor Michael Baxter, who was the city engineer in 2010. So thank you. This report identifies, as did Glenn Harris, that Colwood's GHGs are primarily from transportation and buildings, and mitigation efforts will include increasing energy efficiency. For example, moving to step 5 of the building code soon. So yes, we need to reduce our energy use. Yes, we need to reduce our greenhouse gases. We also need land use planning that protects the natural carbon sinks of forests and trees and soil and oceans. Today, it's clear we also need to work on adaptation to climate change because it's here. So for example, cooling stations may have prevented the nearly 600 deaths in BC attributed to the heat dome in June. Recent climate emergencies, which we all have heard lots about, and particularly in this province, are mobilizing citizens. And the demand for action on this climate emergency is about to become, as has been alluded to, the largest mass movement in history because it has to, because failure to act has dire consequences. So in summary, pollution, global warming, and biodiversity loss are 3 self-inflicted planetary crises that are interconnected, and they put the well-being of current and future generations at unprecedented risk. Fast action, moving on these issues, will show Colwood citizens that you take climate change seriously, and that you also take seriously your role as elected representatives and your position of trust to make ethical decisions about the future for all of us. The well-being of Colwood citizens, whether that is prosperous and progressive or precarious, will be determined by the decisions we make today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will just, Council, is there any questions? Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Signage, for that presentation. I just want to quote the mayor from earlier today in an excellent speech he gave. He said, "Our economic success will be driven by our environmental success." So,
Wow, thank you.
I think we can say that council is on board, and I certainly hope that you will have your input into the climate resiliency plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Yes, I just want to compliment Signage. You know, the more I dig into what you're all about, I think it's great. That I just want to commend you for doing what you're doing right now. My question is, well, I want to make a first comment. Just at this presentation today that we had, it was really interesting, the perspective they brought. You know, I always think the federal government had the power, the provincial government had the power. But, you know, one of the messages that really got through to me was, if it is to be, it's up to me. And we, and me is us at the local government level, because we are coalface, right, with the public. So that message got across to me very, very well. So I was going to ask you, what's your membership size right now? Just a quick question. Okay, what? That's great. Oh. Yeah. No, it's not about size. I came up wrong. But no, it's no, it's great. It's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just for people watching online, the comment was there's about 16 members, just because there wasn't a mic. Thank you again for the presentation. Very much appreciated it. We're going to move on to 8.1. This is rezoning 23-010 2350 2356 Souk Road. There is a recommendation from the November 15th Committee of the Whole meeting. Again, moved by Councillor Logan, seconded by Mayor Martin. Just for discussion, questions or comments? Councillor Day.
Thank you. I think this is, I heard a lot of, I was not able to be here last Monday due to the storm. In fact, I couldn't actually reach City Hall by phone. Because there were many things out, including most of the cell phone networks, although it was really weird. It was very, very spotty. So I did watch that carefully because I think this is an important place in Colwood. It is a very prominent location, and how it looks will impact us all, as well as how well it operates as a place for people to live. So there were a number of comments made by staff and council that this really didn't affect a lot of people. And so I just want to correct that, in that it affects lots of people. It's the shadowing, it's the way that the community feels when you're driving into it or driving home from being somewhere else. So I think it's very important to get it right. And the thought that we would have had that meeting on a stormy night when people probably, at least as far as I understood from the BC Hydro map, I thought the power was out here at City Hall. I didn't anticipate there would be a meeting. So it concerns me that we would assume that this isn't going to bother anybody, nobody's going to be worried about it, and that it's perfectly fine if nobody's able to come to the meeting when we discuss it. That's not my version of democracy, and I really think we need to try to learn from that and maybe make some policies or processes that operate differently to make sure that no one does get left out of the conversation. There were a number of people who said it was completely in line with the official community plan, which I also would take issue with. And that's a difficult thing to say, because the official community plan is a very large document. We don't expect every parcel of land in Colwood to meet every single goal that's outlined in the official community plan, because we know that that's a community level plan, not an individual plan. So we just, I think, need to be very careful not to dismiss what might be of concern to people. I just would like to point out that the height of the 3 levels of parking garage is greater than the height of a story of residential building, just because they need the structure in order to make that safe for 3 different levels. So that it's taller, it's bigger, and I have considerable concerns with that project going forward, and I'm very pleased that the council made the decision to not abandon a public hearing for that item, because we really do need to encourage people to participate, because it's not easy to be heard at City Hall, even when we do everything right to make to roll out the red carpet for citizens to be involved and say their part. It's not easy to be that person on the other side of the podium, and we need to keep that in mind. Thank you. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Before I go to Councillor Jansen, a couple of comments that you mentioned, Councillor Day, that I just wish to respond to. One, the public has every opportunity, last week. Last week was a committee meeting, not a council meeting. So there was no decisions made last week. Last week, the public had an opportunity to come into the building. They also had an opportunity to view this at any point within the last week. They had an opportunity to be here this evening to speak to this motion as well. I also know that in previous councils, I will think of one specific example where there was a snowstorm. We did not have video. We had nothing. The fire department had to come and pick me up at my house, and the council had a council meeting, which you were here for. If we were to look at public participation and public engagement, I would suggest that we did quite well. And we continued on with the business. The entire city was not shut down power-wise. And so, you know, I take very much exception to the comments that you made this evening. I think they're inappropriate.
I think arguing with me at council is inappropriate. I just tried to make you aware of what I was.
Well, I would suggest that some of your comments were insulting to me.
And worse to me.
Councillor Parkinson.
Really?
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Hanson.
I'm in the red here. I see
Yes.
it. Thank you, Worship, and I appreciate the comments from both you. And in fact, I made some notes to myself too. In a time of crisis, if we can't rely on the continuity of government and us as officials here doing business on behalf of the community, I think that is not a place that I would like to live, or not the way I would like to go in that regard either. Certainly, there were no decisions that were taken that were made in a star chamber. Everything we did was publicly available and accessible. I received no complaints from the public, and who seem to be able to find me rather easily if they have something to say, and really no feedback about last week's meeting. So I too take a different tact, I guess, than Councillor Day does. And I think that despite some challenges, we did carry on with the business of the community, and no one will be left out along the way. It was before us last week. It's before us again tonight. People have another opportunity. People will be able to send emails, call us, whatever they want for the next coming weeks. And I suspect that we'll move forward. I do want to make a slight amendment, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor. We had a discussion last week, and I did speak specifically about accessing EV charging, which seems to be topical this evening, for visitors that come to the building. Specifically, it is excluded in the wording here. I don't like the wording in that particular sentence. All off-street residential parking, excluding visitor parking, will include an electrified 110-volt outlet. Now, the proponent was here last week, and I brought that same language up, and they were in agreement that in no way are they going to inhibit access to EV charging. So rather than, I would just like to make sure that's in the bylaw. So I'd like to propose that availability, that we include availability for EV charging for visitors to the building and to the commercial residents or the commercial units in the building as well. That would be my motion, which would require a bit of a exclusionary, excluding some of the language in that particular section I highlighted.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder to that motion? Second by Councillor Baxter. I'm starting a new list. Councillor Parkinson, I will come back to you on the main motion. This is in regards to the amendment. Just going to drop Councillor Parkinson just for a second. Is there any discussion in regards to the amendment? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Thank you. Anything else? Oh, excuse me. So let's, we'll ensure that staff got the wording correctly. Yes, Marcy? Yeah, okay. Councillor Parkinson, can you hit your button and you're up?
Thank you. And I'm a big proponent of disagreement at this table. I think it's healthy to not all be on the same page, but frankly, I was uncomfortable with that discussion earlier. I think we all have to accept that we have different opinions, and we should respect those and let them go. Even there's many things I disagree with in this table, and I've got a sore tongue because of it. But anyway, sorry about that. A couple of things on the item at hand. Much like Councillor Jansen, the off-street residential parking, I had the opportunity this week to attend a seminar put on by the District of Signage, I think, on, let me see if I got the wording right, electric vehicle energy management systems. And it's essentially what it is you group the stalls in the underground parkade on one circuit, and then that circuit has a algorithm that distributes the power so that you're not all trying to draw power at the same time. Strikes me as, obviously, I mean, we're looking at it for our strata as something to, as we all evolve to electric vehicles. I don't know whether that's something that needs to be written into the bylaw, if it's something that is implied by a conduit to each thing, but we have to get smarter about how we do plugins for electric vehicles, because if you have, or what do they have, 130 or 140 parking stalls, if they all want to plug in at the same time, and that, you know, you'd need a humongous feed into the building to be able to do them all at once. So that has to happen, and I'm myself not sure whether it happens with the initial build or the initial build allows for it, and hopefully our staff could maybe understand that a little better than I do, and we could be prepared to make that revision if this goes forward. As I said, I don't think it's a huge cost item. I think it's an efficiency item. The other thing that my notes say here, and I'm not sure, I see in the recommendation that we talk about the contribution to the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund. We don't talk about the contribution for amenities, and that's, I did have a chance to check with the package last time. There's a number in there for amenities. I don't know if that's something that has to get written in, if that's automatic, and I also don't understand if we as a council would look at different amenities for condominiums than we would for apartments. You know, there's probably some merit for that. I don't know if that's the way they're done or not. So I don't know if there's anybody here who can clarify that for me.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Parkinson. I believe the original planner is prepared to answer, but in looking back to the report, it indicates a community net contribution of $1,500 per apartment for this project, which would generate a contribution of $121,500.
I see that, and I see that, you know, it wasn't in the recommendation last week, so I'm assuming it's automatic and doesn't have to be included in the recommendation.
We would bring back the zoning bylaw with this within it.
Okay, and is it typical to have different figures for apartment versus condominium? And do we know what this is at this point? Because there was confusion last week.
I would need to rely on the planner, who I believe Dennis is prepared to
I see his smiling face. Yep.
Through your worship, so the council's current policy regarding amenity contributions doesn't make a distinction between rental and strata for apartments. The reason that we put the specific amount of $500 in a staff recommendation is because that is different than council's current policy regarding amenity contributions to the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund.
Sorry, no, I didn't turn him off. He accidentally turned himself off. Councillor Kobayashi, I'm just going to drop you just for a second. Councillor Day, I'm going to drop you for a second. Sorry. Councillor Parkinson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. I think that pretty much answers the question. I think the existing policy is 1 suite and 10 has to be affordable rental, or has to be, I'm not quite sure what it is, but I think it's one that we've never followed since I've been on council. So tempting as it may be, leave that sleeping dogs lie, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much. We seem to go through this discussion a lot of what should or should not be in recommendation. I'm a bit confused, but I understood it was implied that it was going to be, that it was in it, because I learned that actually over time here, but we seem to be going through this discussion every single time, what is or isn't in the recommendation and what's going to be in the actual bylaw. So is there how do we decide what does and doesn't go into recommendation is my question.
Through your worship to Councillor Kobayashi, administration will attempt to be more clear the next time, and certainly when this does come back, should this motion pass, will be crystal clear when you see it again.
Thank you.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just wanted clarification on that answer because it, and I admit I'm relying on my memory of the development of the affordable housing program because we went through many phases of our affordable housing program. But at one point in time, not that long ago, like in the last term, we made a decision that we wanted to support more rentals being available because they fill that middle to low income niche kind of in being able to provide something that month to month somebody who maybe can't right now afford to get into home ownership could afford to live in, and therefore rental properties were given a caveat that for at least 10 years they would be maintained as market rental. And that was instead of making a contribution to the affordable housing policy fund. So I felt there was a lot of confusion and I felt confused by the answer. So I just would like to know, does it matter if it's homes that are owned versus homes that are available for rental? And are they going to contribute significantly to the affordable housing program, or are they not?
Worship, could I respond to that?
You may.
A couple of things to point out. Currently, the city's Affordable Housing Reserve Fund does not reference apartment buildings, rental or strata in terms of their amenity or the amenity contribution. As pointed out in our staff report, council did direct that the whole issue of community amenity contributions and affordable housing policy be brought back to them for discussion. I would defer to Mr. Boorhill on the timing of that. But I think that would probably go a long ways towards addressing some of the confusion that members of council are expressing. Thank you.
Mr. Boorhill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and apologies for not being in chambers in person tonight. So we are scheduling the first phase of discussions around potential changes to the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund in a council meeting scheduled for January 2022.
Sorry, I didn't get an answer to my question, which was, does it matter if this development that we're talking about here tonight, that we're being asked to vote on, I just want to know, does it matter whether it's rental or non-rental to the affordable housing costs?
Thank you for that follow-up question. Through the mayor, the current policy does not distinguish between the tenure of housing as it relates to either condominium or rental. In your previous comments, I believe you were referring to previous applications where council accepted a section 219 covenant requiring that the units provided be maintained as a rental tenure for a minimum of 10 years. I believe the apartment buildings built on Machosen Road some years ago were under that arrangement.
Okay, so no one is offering any opinion as to whether that was a good idea or a bad idea. Okay, thanks.
Mr. Borhill, were you trying to talk? Because I saw the yellow box, but you're muted.
I'm done with the responses at this time, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I don't see anything else, so I will call the question then on the main motion. Those in opposition? Councillor Day opposes. That motion passes. Moving on to 8.2, this is Sandra Russell, our corporate communications manager, regarding the draft neighborhood wayfinding strategy. Ms. Russell.
Thank you, Mayor Martin. Thanks for this opportunity to provide an update on the neighborhood wayfinding strategy that's in progress. This was intended to be a presentation as an update for information only. So this is a project that touches on multiple strategic plan goals: mobility, vibrance, prosperity, all of those goals in the strategic plan. It has the potential to enhance sense of place in Colwood through a well thought out program of signage. The team doing the work for us is Signage. They're a design firm specializing in wayfinding, accessibility, signage, environmental graphics, and placemaking. Their work dramatically impacts people's perception of their environment, their access to important services, their willingness to explore, and their desire to return. So I would like to welcome Lauren McDonald and Jordan Mitchell from Signage to present the work they've begun for us.
Great. Thank you, Sandra. And thank you, Mayor and Council, for your time this evening. As Sandra mentioned, my name is Lauren McDonald. I am a project designer at Signage. And yes, my colleague Jordan Mitchell is also on the call as well. So I am just going to try and share my screen here. Oops. Are you able to see my screen?
We can see it. It's not in full display though.
Okay.
Oh, geez. That was interesting.
Oh. Are you able to see my screen now?
We see the City of Colwood Neighborhood Wayfinding Strategy presentation to City Council. Is that what you wish for us to see?
Perfect. Yes. Thank you. So I thought first we would just, again, introduce ourselves. So we are from Signage, and just go over a few goals that we have come up with over our work so far. We were engaged in this summer to work with the city on this project. So through quite a bit of extensive research and planning, we've kind of come up with a set of goals that have really driven this project so far. So this project is meant to enhance the experience within Colwood for both visitors and residents, and to help implement wayfinding strategies that support the growth of the city. We also look to support the various modes of transportation by connecting services and amenities and creating a stronger sense of navigation and orientation throughout the city. And finally, a focus on sustainability and by approaching our design and strategy with the use of sensible materials and product choices, with an emphasis on a system that will support continued changes over time. So yeah, I'm just going to go quickly through kind of the phases that we have laid out so far. So our first phase was known as the current state audit. So in this phase, we had done kind of a full audit of the city, taking lots of pictures of signage that is already in place, and kind of just basically exploring the neighborhood through the eyes of somebody who was maybe visiting there for the first time and trying to find their way to some major destinations and just kind of experience the whole connectivity of the city. So this process also included reviewing quite a few of your official community plans, your strategic plan, codes, municipal bylaws, and just like kind of a general background of the city. So it also included us looking at some key destination points and some key decision-making points within the city, and just to kind of see how people are navigating or being directed as to how to move throughout the city. So some of the key findings that we came across was when you come into Colwood, especially on that kind of main roadway, on the Old Island Highway, there is some really nice signage that welcomes you. And we also noticed that actually at each entry point coming into the city, there was some signage that gave you a sense that you're coming into the city. The thing that we did notice though was when you're traveling throughout the city, there's not a lot of indications that you're currently in Colwood. The other thing we noticed was there's a little bit of sign clutter in some places, and we do understand that you do have some codes that address kind of where signage or temporary signage can be placed. So we're just looking at maybe how we can, again, just kind of like get that kind of tidied up a little bit. And then the other thing was just a bit of lack of continuity with the signage design. There's quite a few different styles that are used throughout the city. There's some really nice initiatives for kind of some artisan looking signage with driftwood and everything. But it's all feeling just like a little disconnected. And then just kind of overall scale and size of some of the signage, especially when it came to vehicle directional signage, and especially on major roadways where you have a lot of traffic and just like, yeah, a bit of lack of size and scale for some of this signage. So phase 2 of our process here has been looking at coming up with a strategy that includes recommendations and some looking more closely at things like nomenclature, what major destinations are within the city, how it's being referred to. And a big one that we looked at was the different neighborhoods that are throughout the city. So we were able to kind of look at some of the boundaries that the neighborhoods reside in and just offer a few solutions or guidance as to how things are divided. We also, again, looked at the naming conventions for these neighborhoods, and we're trying to kind of think through how members of the community might refer to like where they are living geographically within the city, and if the naming conventions would make sense for them. So through this, we've kind of gone through and come up with a few different what we call sign types that we think that Colwood would benefit from implementing in the next little while. So this would be things like gateway markers. And again, I know that there are some that are implemented right now, but just looking at different entrances into the city and looking at how the city is growing and traffic is kind of coming through, like maybe there's some more opportunities at more major entrances, other than kind of like the standard coming in from the city. So coming in from Veterans Memorial and things like that. So here we're just kind of showing what we're calling a location map. So we've plotted these different signs. Again, this is after we've kind of done a lot of planning and research as to where we feel the signage would be the most effective. So now we're getting into some design of the signage system. Again, this is all kind of a work in progress, but our design had kind of started here, and we have pulled quite a bit of inspiration from Colwood's seaside, so the kind of driftwood texture look, that light wood grain feel. We've also understood that the newly implemented Colwood Park signage has been really well received, so we wanted to pull from that as well. So materiality, we're looking at, yes, incorporating this driftwood accent, and then using something like a painted aluminum for the face of the signage. So right here, we're showing like what a typical gateway welcome to Colwood sign may look like. So moving into, as I had mentioned before, the neighborhoods that we're looking at, defining a little bit better. So having signage that welcomes you into the neighborhood. These are nice, that is, they have this little detail in the center here where this kind of irregular line is actually a portion of the major roadways that go through each of these neighborhoods. And then looking at things like major vehicle directional signage. I know these look fairly large and scaled, but the way that we've incorporated the design here, it's meets accessibility standards, and we've also incorporated some modularity into it. So these signs could be easily updated, just with changing out certain panels for destinations that need to be swapped out. And then again, just thinking about the connectivity within the city. So we're looking at some pedestrian directional signage. So again, these would be placed in major areas where people are biking and walking, and just another element to help people move throughout the city and connect to all the different destinations within. And again, just kind of banner design could be used to reinforce neighborhoods that you're in. So they could, I know that you have initiatives where you highlight some art, some local art or art program, but this could be another opportunity to, again, just acknowledge that you're in Colwood and you're in a certain neighborhood. So yeah, so that is currently our work in progress and where we are at. So our next steps are to develop this wayfinding strategy report, which is a fairly comprehensive document that details out recommendations and best practices. And yeah, an overall kind of assessment of the wayfinding conditions and the potential opportunities to work some of the signage into the community. And then the last phase is an implementation plan. So we will provide an outline for signage of kind of the highest needs within the city. And this is also where we can give a base for some pricing and a budget for this implementation. So yes, that's it. Thank you very much for allowing us to share. And I believe that's it. Oh, sorry, I can't hear anybody.
You need to unmute the council chambers. Thank you.
What I said was we have no council questions, so thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks. We are going to move on then to 8.3. This is our Manager of Finance, Ms. Bovin, regarding the 2021 audited appointment.
Hi, Your Worship and Council. I do not have a presentation tonight, and this should be brief. So it is a requirement of the community charter that council appoint an auditor for each year. It can be done a year at a time or years in advance. And it is the time now that council needs to appoint MMP as the auditor for the 2021 fiscal year. The report is fairly self-explanatory, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Councillor Parkinson.
I'll move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Day. Discussion? Councillor Day.
Thank you. And thank you for the report, Ms. Bovin. Just curious, you didn't investigate any other opportunities. We've had MNP for many years now. I'm assuming that is because you are happily working with the auditors to accomplish what we need to accomplish. But I think it would make a lot of sense if we had a report that told us that or gave us some other options to consider, because as the report is written, I think it would be quite injurious to our budget process to try to go scrambling looking for a different auditor at this stage.
Thank you, Councillor Day, through Your Worship. The report did mention that we will be going to RFP for audit services in 22 for the 2022 and future years fiscal audit. It is not unusual to have an auditor for several years. We do quotes on a regular basis. And in this case, I believe the last quote we received from MMP was for a 5-year period. And so we're doing this for 1 year, and we will go to RFP for future years.
I'm not seeing any other questions, so I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Moving on to 8.4, this is Ms. Irving regarding the interim deputy corporate officers 2022 meeting schedule and acting mayor rotation.
Thank you. Good evening. The report before you tonight provides 3 options for the 2022 meeting schedule and acting mayor rotation. To provide some background, the community charter requires that each year council make available a schedule of the date, time, and place of regular council meetings by way of posting on our public notice board and publishing the schedule in 2 consecutive weeks of the newspaper. The procedure bylaw prescribes council meeting schedule as the 2nd and 4th Monday of each month, and council determined last year a 6:30 p.m. start. The procedure bylaw coming for adoption tonight reserves the 1st and 3rd Monday of each month for committee of the whole, if required, with the exception of summer recess. In previous years, council has agreed to this schedule with a start time of 6:30 p.m. In 2022, through the strategic plan, select committees were formed. The Waterfront Committee, or the Waterfront Coastal Processes Committee, was established in January 2020 for a 1-year term and was extended for an additional term, which is set to expire January 2022. Staff have recommended that this committee be extended to the end of 2022 so that additional work can be completed. In April 2020, the Finance and Governance, Transportation and Economic Prosperity Committees were established to run for a 2-year term ending April 2022. These meetings take place in April, June, September, and October, with Finance and Governance having an additional 4 meetings in November to accommodate service review discussions. This means that there will only be 1 more meeting for each committee prior to the end of the 2-year term. There have been some challenges with these 3 committees, such as council's availability for afternoon meetings and the meeting schedule not aligning with work plans. There have been times when there was only one item coming forward, which did not warrant holding a standalone meeting. And in those cases, those items were moved to committee of the whole instead. During the procedure bylaw review, council indicated that the acting mayor rotation schedule be presented to council for consideration each year. Staff are presenting that the acting mayor position for the remainder of council's term be Councillor Kobayashi from November 2021 to February 2022, Councillor Logan from March 2022 to June 2022, and Councillor Parkinson from July 2022 to October 2022. So there are 3 options in the report, and staff are looking to council for direction.
Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I like option 2. I think the select committees have value, and I would admit that perhaps we haven't maximized that value yet, but I think with time we will. So I'm going to move option 2, that basically extends those select committees to the end of our council's term, extends the Waterfront Coastal Processes Committee to next December, which I think will get us over the line with some solid recommendations from that committee. And the acting mayor rotation is just kind of filling in the blanks from where we started a few years ago. So I would move option 2.
Thank you. Second by Councillor Kobayashi. Discussion? Councillor Day.
No, I'm good, thank you.
Oh, okay. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Thank you. Moving on. Sorry, I'm gonna go back. We are now in bylaws. This is 9.1 bylaw number 1890, council procedural bylaw. This is for adoption. Moved by Councillor Day, seconded by Councillor Parkinson. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Thank you. Bylaw number 1911, bylaw notice enforcement bylaw. This is for adoption. Moved by Councillor Logan, seconded by Councillor Jansen. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Councillor Day opposes. Moving on to 9.3, this is bylaw number 1913, land use bylaw amendment CD 332350 Souk Road. This is for first and second reading. Moved by Councillor Logan, seconded by Councillor Baxter. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Councillor Day opposes. Motion to adjourn. Thank you, Councillor Logan. Any in opposition? Nobody opposes.